Afternoon, everybody. It's Tuesday afternoon, and it is 4 o'clock, which means it's time for the Africam show. And I will be your host today, Ben Coley, and I'll be with you for the next 45 minutes or so as we celebrate World Elephant Day. And what a great way to start off with one of the aforementioned elephants at Old Donyo. A relatively rowdy rabble of guinea fowl as well. Actually, saw a lovely photo earlier today on social media of a bunch of vulturine guinea fowl chicks. It's a bird that I've never seen, a vulturine guinea fowl, which I would very much like to. It's quite high on my list. But we should appreciate this young bull who is busy having a drink whilst we greet a few people. Thank you, everybody, for sending in some messages. Of course, if you are just joining us for the first time, this is live and interactive. And we absolutely love hearing from you, and we'll try and give you a mention where we can. So, Jack DeBoer, glad to see you've joined us again, saying good morning from Chesapeake in Virginia. Amber CO saying hello and thanking the entire team for today's show. Hello, Jean Gale, as well. With a chilled coffee on a sunny, warm morning in the foothills nearish Seattle. That's rather vague, but we'll assume the Seattle area. Namaste to Zygote. Hello, Bridget McKinney, and hello, Carlo as well. Happy World Elephant Day to all of you. And Bob of Kittens, you just made it. And you've already finished your coffee. Well, I suggest you get the kettle on and get another one brewing, I suggest. Interesting to see a bit of a dazzle of zebra beginning to accumulate in the background. Maybe considering that this one youngish looking male is not going to be overly protective of the water. Still, I wouldn't back their chances if he gets a little bit feisty. Never underestimate the power of an elephant, even a young one. I was fortunate enough to be in Kruger last week. I had to go right up to the Pafuri region, so right up in the northern tip of the park, which, if any of you have never been up there, I strongly suggest you do. It's much quieter in terms of sightings, but topographically and just if you want pristine wilderness, it is such a spectacular area to go and visit with towering baobabs, beautiful topography, and plenty of elephant, plenty of buffalo. Saw eland, saw tessiby, which you don't see in the park very often at all. And yeah, I saw countless elephants whilst I was up there, and three massive herds of buffalo, all a few hundred each. And at one point, there was a classic Kruger experience whereby we were all stuck on the road, having to reverse as a massive elephant bull just plodded down the tarmac, unwilling to give way to anybody. We had about four or five cars steadily reversing away from him. I should add, he wasn't aggressive in any way, shape, or form. I didn't see any head shaking, but he knew that he was the boss and he was just plodding along the road, causing everybody to get out of his way. But eventually he meandered off the path and was absolutely quite content with everybody filing past him. I would say everybody, but the north of the park, one of the real draw cards for it is it's generally very quiet as well. So you're not sharing sightings with many other vehicles, which is always wonderful. MG Leopard Spots, you're joining us and are excited for the show, and you have some iced water. How lovely. And then happy World Elephant Day to you, Oza Negro, as well. Bobby Joe saying this is amazing. It's always amazing. Old Donyo is such an incredible camera. I think it's certainly from all of us who do these shows, it's the one constant, really. You never know quite what you're going to get at the other cameras. Sometimes there can be some incredible sightings, don't get me wrong, but there's always something happening at Old Donyo. I've never visited the area specifically, this Trulu Hills area, but I can assume that it's the only permanently sort of pumped water source for quite some distance because there is just 24 hours a day. There seems to be a constant stream of animals coming down to. April Owl, you're in a hot Connecticut, and you're happy to be with us with cherry iced tea. That sounds delightful. Andy, good afternoon to you as well. You're asking how often do I sit outside and just stargaze when I'm here in South Africa, and you'd love to watch an astronomy show here using the cameras. Andy, that's a dream to be able to get to that stage. The problem is it's quite a difficult thing to translate to the camera. Half of the or the majority of the enjoyment is actually sitting underneath the expanse of an open sky, and regrettably, it does lose a little bit of its a little bit of its grandeur if you're watching it on a screen. But I quite regularly go outside. I have to say, some of it through enjoyment, some of it because I'm photographing things, which does take a long time because I'm having to amass hours and hours of data. So I normally take the opportunity to explore with a decent pair of binoculars. It's amazing what you can spot. Just with binoculars, you do not have to have a fancy, expensive telescope. So don't fall into that trap. I've actually spoken to quite a few people about telescopes recently. There's a big push to for people getting them at the moment because of the popularity of astrotourism. And I'll say, if you're going to get one, please don't buy a rubbish one. If it's cheap for a reason, and you will regret it. So if you're going to do it properly. And I'm happy to advise anybody who does want to go down that route. But I often go outside as well and just look up just to familiarize myself with my job and doing a lot of training. Obviously, it's very important that I have a good knowledge of where everything is. And as the sky changes throughout the year, as we're looking out into a different part of the galaxy, the constellations change as well. So you've got to just check up every now and again and just make sure you know where everything is. Once you've done it a few times, if you've been doing it for a few years and you're quite accustomed to the sky, you learn that mental blueprint of where everything is. But there are still times when I get out and I look up and I see absolutely nothing. But then I'll find one star or one constellation I recognize, and the others just sort of fall into place. Always comment that it's unusual that there aren't more elephants up in the night sky. But I did find a story from the Swana culture up towards the northern part of South Africa and into Botswana recently, referring to the great constellation Scorpius, which is high above our head at the moment. Scorpio, Scorpius, sort of interchangeable names, that suggest that Antares is a matriarch elephant, and the rest of the scorpion's body and the tail are her herd, and she's leading them to the three baobab trees, which are the front of the scorpion, the forehead and the two stingers, if you will. Other potential stories of the Great Square of Pegasus possibly being seen as an elephant, but very few references considering the impressive nature of this animal and what it must have meant to ancient cultures. But if you haven't noticed, we have headed down to Tau in Madikwe, where we've got another elephant bull, certainly by the looks of it. Not quite sure what he's doing. I'm finding some little forbs or little creepers that are coming through, perhaps in the grass there. Bobby Joe, you absolutely adore all nature and wildlife beyond adore, in fact. Bobby Joe, then you are in the right place because I think we all share that sentiment. And it doesn't matter what we see on these cameras, it's just a real delight to bring these images of Africa into your front room or wherever you may be watching from. Just enjoying the sights and the sounds of the African bush, all of these wonderful different locations. Does look very dry still up in Madikwe, certainly. Alfredo Leone. That sounds rather Italian. I don't know if it is Alfredo, but you're asking how many liters of water should or can an elephant drink per day? Well, of course, it's difficult to give you a specific answer because it depends on the individual's time of year. During the summer, they will require less than they would during the winter because they're getting moisture through the vegetation that they're eating. But if we take a sort of a best slash worst case scenario of a massive elephant bull during the dry winter months, you could say 150 liters of water a day is probably about par for the course, as they say, which is a staggering amount of water. And if you consider how many elephants there are, it just shows you how important water is to their and everything else's survival for that matter. But they can go days without water, and they have that ability to store water in their little pouch in their throats, that pharyngeal pouch that can hold a few liters, which they'll often use to spray on themselves to cool down or potentially even to drink from under severe water stress. And of course, they are well known for migrating over huge areas to get to water, particularly in those drier areas. Bikini, you're saying Jupiter and Venus are in your sky. I'm not sure if you're referring to astrological things there, but if you're not, if those are your favorites, then you must go out early tomorrow morning, depending on where you are, because Jupiter and Venus are so close to each other at the moment. They are less than 1 degree, which is the width of your little finger held at arm's length, basically, apart. Tomorrow morning, they'll be at their closest. So we'll easily see both of them through a pair of binoculars. So a nice what we call conjunction of those two planets. And of course, very exciting for us here in South Africa as the days tick by. Saturn is becoming higher and higher, earlier and earlier in the evening. It's rising at about 8:30, quarter to 9 at the moment. So it won't be long till we can enjoy beautiful views of its rings again, which is always a highlight for any stargazing evening. Let's see these crocs as well, lying head to toe to one another, kind of like the way zebras often stand. I wouldn't want to get in the way of one of those crocodile tails swatting away things from the other one's face. Quite a slap in the face, quite literally. Trying to see what that little bird is in the background. I can see a couple of plovers on the right and what I think was a coot on the left, but that other one's sitting just on the bank against the white soil there. I'm not quite sure, maybe a sandpiper of some description. I can't quite see clearly enough. But even though the conditions are harsh, some of our birds are beginning to return already. It's normally one of the first to return, I noticed, normally in August, and they are back, and that is the lesser striped swallows. I've seen quite a few of those now, and that very sort of characteristic, almost electronic, metallic-y sort of noise that they make. And I'm not unconvinced. I saw a couple of things in the garden here in Hoedspruit the other day. I didn't get a close enough look. I didn't have my binoculars with me, but they were relatively close and they were fairly small, grayish, with a very needle-like beak, so an insect eater, but too petite to be a flycatcher. So my guess was a garden warbler or a pair of garden warblers. But they shouldn't be coming back for another few months. But with all the changes, global warming and all sorts of other climatic changes, you never quite know. I'm gutted I didn't get a photograph to be able to verify, but I'm sure it was one of the warblers. And for a fairly nondescript grey warbler, that narrows it down to garden warbler or possibly olive tree warbler, both of which are Palearctic migrants, meaning they go north of the Sahara every year and only come back in our summer. So maybe some have come early because I don't know what else it was if it wasn't one of those. It's always a treat to catch up with our crocs there at Tau, and very easy to recognise that rather pale one in comparison to a lot of the others. Just an absence of melanin, not a complete lack of melanin. It's not really leucism; it's just a slightly different percentage of melanin in the skin. Looks like this boy is going to wander off into the dry brush. I do feel very sorry for all the animals this time of year, how they're able to find food under these conditions. Even here, we haven't had any rain for a while. We have a couple of dacres that often come and visit the garden. I noticed the female dacre looked a little bit skinny the other day as well. So everybody really struggling to find food now. Elephants, of course, this time of year will be relying an awful lot on the cambium layer, that um, area of sort of carbohydrates that the tree produces during photosynthesis and stores just under the bark in that sort of orangey layer, as well as digging up roots where the tree is keeping a lot of that energy to avoid these harsh conditions. Lovely to see a kudu as well. Oh, time to check in on our black eagle chicks. Wow, it's only been like a week or so since I last saw. Here was it a week, maybe more than 10 days, where it was just beginning to develop some of its feathers. And now look at it. I can't see any of those white downy feathers that it had, but I'm glad to see it hasn't fallen out of the nest because we were getting a little bit concerned that it was getting quite explorative. Is that a word? It was exploring the boundaries of its nest quite a lot. And we were slightly worried that he might topple over the edge at one point. But now definitely beginning to look like a proper eagle. Amazing view there, hey? So I get you saying that could have been a black wing stilt back at Tower. It could have been, yes. I just couldn't get a clear enough look. Wasn't sure. Sandpiper. I thought for a moment it might have been one of the teals, but yeah, hard to know. Bobby Joe, you're asking why tigers don't live in Africa if we have uh, lions? It's a good question, Bobby Joe. I don't have uh, an obvious answer for you, but logic would suggest that we often refer to what we call an ecological niche, which is the part of an ecosystem that an animal or an organism exploits the best way it possibly can. And Africa has been a home to a number of large predators over the millennia. We still have lions, we have leopards, we have spotted hyenas, brown hyenas, wild dogs, cheetahs. I can only assume there was just not so much demand or not so much space or requirement for tigers to have evolved here. Um, so yeah, I think that's the most obvious answer as far as I can tell you. That we just have a surplus of large predators, and you can't have too much of anything. Otherwise, you risk upsetting the balance of an ecosystem. We have moved to Mwela in Botswana. We're seeing another Eddie coming down for a drink, I would think. But we often talk about an ecological pyramid where you have your producers and your primary consumers and your secondary consumers and your tertiary consumers. And they're sort of staggered like a pyramid. You have lots of producers like grass and leaves and vegetation. There's a lot of those. And then there's a slightly smaller number of animals that eat those, and then a slightly smaller number of animals that eat those animals. So you get less and less as you go up the food chain. So if you think of it like a pyramid, if the pyramid was reversed and you just had a very small base and a very heavy top, the pyramid would topple over. And that's the same with an ecosystem. If you add um, too many apex predators, they'll eat everything, and that will completely destroy the ecosystem, and the whole thing will fall apart. So I think it was just a question of there was already enough big predators in Africa, and not so many in the Asian area. So those elephants run out of batteries, just having a little pause momentarily. We have, of course, been seeing lots and lots of zebras here in Buella recently, but I see more wildebeest than I do zebras at the moment. Possibly just a little bit of an elephant right at the edge of the screen on the right-hand side there as well. But this one looks as if he's found some water already, had a little bit of a mud bath. Actually, on my little trip to Kruger, I also went in for a day trip a few days ago as well, and had a beautiful sighting of three or four elephant bulls having a lovely mud bath at one of the pans in the park, spraying mud all over the place. One of them even got down and had a little bit of a roll around in the mud as well. Always special to see. Got some nice photos, although they did choose to do it in the shade, which I completely understand, but not ideal from a photographic standpoint. But having recently got myself a nice lens, I'm getting back into wildlife photography again. I've spent years photographing the sky and looking up with my camera because I didn't have any form of zoom lens, but a very generous friend has let me use their 200 to 600 mil lens for a little bit now. So I'm very much enjoying getting some nice pics of animals, some lovely elephants or a cory bustard. Got a beautiful sequence of photos of ground hornbills doing some courtship feeding as well. And I should also point out that I did see a leopard, thanks to a monkey, which alerted us to something. And we quickly pulled into one of those little pull-offs there in the park, down close to some water, and on the other side of the water was a beautiful male leopard who just finished having a drink, and we sort of saw him disappear in and out of the tree line as he was moving off down the river. So very, very special. Had our own leopard sighting, no one else in the vicinity. Not often you can say that in Kruger, so that was very, very special. Sure what this elephant's doing. He's just stopped and just fiddling around, just having a bit of a break, I guess. They do, of course, sleep standing up as well. Often when they've got their trunk lying on the ground there, you can see it just curled up in front of him, just taking some of the weight, often having a little 40 winks. That the other animals aren't moving out of the other elephant in the background on the right way. Everybody's quite happily sharing the same area. I think probably the most interesting thing I saw in the park, and I did post a few photos of it a couple of days ago, is I saw a male giraffe with what must have been, well, what was probably one of the most, say horrific sounds a bit harsh, but um, yeah, horrific injuries that I've ever seen on a giraffe. It's very difficult to describe. You'll have to go, and this is not a plug, but you'll have to go and have a look at the photos to really see what I mean. But just underneath the ossicone and sort of above the eye was an enormous gaping hole, and I do mean an enormous hole. It was probably 2 or 3 centimeters wide and 4 or 5 centimeters high, and it was so deep that we couldn't even see into the hole. It was weeping, and I posted it and asked a few people what they thought could have possibly have happened to this poor giraffe. The whole side of his face was swollen, obviously lost the sight in one eye. We think it looked as if it cracked its skull, and we were trying to work out how on earth it could have done that and how on earth it's still able to function. Best we could come up with, somebody suggested that it was taking a swing during a necking fight with another male, possibly missed and cracked its head on a rock or a hard tree stump or something, but it seemed to have completely split the skull up the side of the head. And say you could not see the bottom of this. It must go almost have gone into the brain. Yet the giraffe seemed in relatively good condition. It was an old male. It's obviously an injury that's been there for a while because it was relatively healed, but it still was still weeping sort of fluid and blood. But other than the fact that it was relatively old, it looked in pretty decent condition considering, and it's just absolutely remarkable that this thing was still able to function, and how nature is able to deal with these debilitating injuries. I'm still blown away by it. It's hard to even describe. ENC, you've managed to join us. You've overslept. I'm sorry to hear that, but as you said, better late than never. Well, DNC, you haven't missed anything too amazing. We've had various elephants, we've had some crocs, we've had some zebras and some wildebeest. But we are, of course, appreciating the elephants, particularly today, being World Elephant Day. I wonder if this boy got a little bit disturbed by all the zebra activity and he's decided that, no, I've had a decent drink. It's all too much commotion here. I'm going to head off to the safety of the bush in the background. And the zebras say, thank you very much. We will take the opportunity whilst we can. I have to say, I did also see one terrible thing in the park with a nice herd of elephants. About 20 or 30 of them crossed the road and went down to drink at the river. And there was a car also there on sort of opposite me, where in between, on the other side of where they crossed. And the driver decided it would be a good idea to get out of his car, walk across the road, and stand just off the road with his phone camera filming the elephants drinking only about 30 meters away. He did receive some fairly unpleasant language from me, but still amazing that people still think that is okay. I would say the elephants didn't seem too disturbed by it, and he was probably more in danger himself than he was of upsetting the elephants. But it is still a shame that people still take those opportunities. It was as if they left that gap, especially for that zebra to come in. Great example of the dazzling effect there. Very difficult to know how many zebras are there as they're all moving backwards and forwards and toing and froing, very distorting on the eyes. One's decided that's the best place to be. Push the first wave into the water now. An incredible design that nature has come up with these zebras. Um, and it's one of the earliest forms of, or been used by humans, and one of the earliest forms of what we call biomimicry. That certain navies have actually painted their battleships or their warships in black and white stripes going in different directions because it has been proven that it is rather tricky then to figure out trajectory and distance of a moving target, which has got all these weird lines. This is obviously before the days of radar and fancy homing missiles and things, when things were done by clever people with pens and pencils or paper and pencils. It was very, very difficult to do the maths if you weren't quite sure exactly what direction and what speed the enemy was traveling. But it's one of my favorite things, biomimicry. I must look in to see. I'm sure there have been some more examples that have been used recently, but some of the classic ones are like the bullet train in Japan, its nose cone having been remodeled on the beak of a kingfisher in order to deal with the problem of sort of breaking the sound barrier. Well, breaking the sound barrier, but the noise that was caused when the bullet train was going through tunnels and the air pressure changes. It wasn't cutting through the air very efficiently. So the nose cone was remodeled. Various wind turbines have got rather jaggedy looking wings now or sails based on the fins of a humpback whale because it's been proven that those are more efficient in terms of cutting through the air. And a very interesting one involving shark skin as well, because nothing grows on a shark. Bacteria and things doesn't like to grow on the skin, so they kind of make like a veneer based on the microscopic construction of a shark's skin, and have used it in hospitals to try and stop bacteria and other potential infectious things from proliferating on surfaces, which should obviously be kept sterile for the benefit of the patients. There are lots and lots of examples that have been used in human engineering and based on what has been seen in nature. Bobby Joe, you're right. Zebras are so beautiful. They're often, I wouldn't say dismissed, but because they're not a rare sight out here, we perhaps don't give them the credit that is due for just how incredibly pretty they are and unique and visually stimulating that zebras can be, particularly in large numbers like this. So, my favorite part is always the bit on the forehead, that little diamond shape that sort of manifests there. And I just love the fact that the mane follows the same color as the rest of the stripes as well. I know we say this often, but just take a look at every single one of these zebras, and you will not see two that are exactly the same. There must be some that are similar. It'd be interesting to know whether, if you looked at zebras that came from the same parents, perhaps if you have a stallion in charge of a harem and fathers multiple foals with the same female, whether their stripe pattern is closer perhaps to each other than two random individuals. I don't know if any studies have ever been done on that. It'd be interesting to know though if that sort of genetic patterning is passed on. Richard McKinney, you're saying so interesting. I assume you're referring to the biomimicry stuff, but yeah, I mean, go have a look. There's loads of examples. There was talk of hypodermic needles being based on mosquito proboscises to make them less painful. Capturing water by looking at the way that the toki beetles and other beetles in the Namib Desert are able to capture water on the carapace of the sort of the dome of their back, and they stand with they're doing kind of like a handstand, so the waters drip down their body and into their mouth, so they can get some fluid that way as well, catching it off the mist that rolls in off the sea. And of course, the very famous example in Zimbabwe of the building that has a natural air conditioning system based upon the mechanics of a termite mound and the way that their air is constantly being circulated. There are loads and loads, bless you, loads and loads of examples. I haven't actually looked into any of the new ones, but I'm sure as we go and we get A, better at engineering, and B, become more aware of these animals. And we watch them and we understand them better, and we start coming up with ways that we can perhaps benefit from their millions of years of evolution. I'm sure there are some others as well. If anybody knows of any that have recently come up, please do share. Not sure what that little outburst was for. It was just like a slightly younger one came in as he was calling, whether that was chastising one of his ladies or one of the youngsters for moving too far away from the rest of the harem. I'm not sure. So one of my favorite noises, a distant zebra whooping, if that's the right word. I don't even know how you would describe it. That, along with a jackal, that sort of late afternoon sun setting, that eerie howl of a jackal is very stereotypical Africa for me. There are, of course, so many to choose from. And actually, at the lodge where I was at up in Pafuri, the outpost, which is a beautiful lodge up there with a stunning view over the Lavuvu Valley, they've started doing sound safaris, which I know other places also do, but with those sort of parabolic uh, radar dishes, and people wear headphones, and you can hear all the bird calls and the sounds of animals moving through the grass and little contact calls between them as we continue to search for sort of new and improved, more connective ways to appreciate the nature surrounding us. That's a really interesting new fad that is sort of happening at the moment. It's been around for a while, but nice to know that more lodges are looking at these alternative options. I should say, there's big news for the birders amongst you. I got a lifer when I was up at Pafuri as well, one that I have been looking for well over a decade. I can finally confidently say that I have now ticked off the lemon-breasted canary off my life list, which was very, very exciting. I've spent used to work up in the Pafuri area and kept looking for this particular bird because it's the only place you can see it in South Africa is right up there in that northern tip, and it had always eluded me. But this time I managed to find one, so very, very chuffed. Taken my life list to 593 for South Africa now. I still need seven more to breach the 600 barrier, but I'm very excited to be able to do so. However, unfortunately, I generally only get one or two lifers a year if I'm lucky. We've obviously come back to Moella, a couple of, again, young bulls enjoying the fresh water being pumped into this little puddle. Interesting, the one on the left is not also going for the fresher water. I imagine that water is all relatively clean. Just having a quick look. Sorry if I've gone quiet. I'm just having a quick look at some recent biomimicry news. And I see in 2024 there were some solar panels that were designed based on leaves and the vein structures of a leaf. Um, and it enhanced the efficiency of those solar cells by improving the light absorption with about a 20% increase in energy conversion rates, which is pretty cool. Amazing that leaves have been around for so long, and we've only thought now to use that knowledge in terms of solar panels, but I'm sure it's advances in being able to facilitate those changes as opposed to a lack of awareness of them. Well, thank you for your excitement about my life. But yes, it doesn't happen very often now. So when I do get one, I do get quite excited, and particularly that one. It's one I've been looking for a very, very long time. Here's another one. A couple of years ago, engineers designed drones that mimic the aerodynamic properties of maple seeds, allowing for stable and efficient flight. Montenegro, you're saying I must be a world traveler to see that many species. I'm amazed. Well, not amazed, but well, I am amazed. But we're so lucky here in just southern Africa, Montenegro, that we've got best part of 900 species that we can look for here. I don't actually have a life list from all my tools, but I've probably got another 20 or 30 that would be more endemic to Tanzania when I was up there. I got what's about 70 or 75 birds over in New Zealand. My list in England is probably somewhere between 50 and 70 as well. But whenever I go anywhere, I always try and keep a list. At some point, I must congregate all these lists together to create a world list. But some people live and breathe this stuff over there. I saw something the other day of somebody just saw their 8,000th different species, and there are a couple of people who have tipped the 10,000 species mark, and there's not many more than that in terms of known species on the entire planet. So there are some serious, serious birders out there, but nice if you can travel to all these new places, and all you need is a pair of binoculars and some patience. But it's ironic that there are still some that continue to elude us even after years of looking. I still have not found my green twin spot, which is not an uncommon bird. But 20 years of searching, I still have not had a verified sighting of one. So that's one that I should be able to tick off relatively easily, he says, 20 years later. But what normally happens with those is you find the one you're missing and then they turn up everywhere. It happened with the black-faced waxbill. Looked for that thing for years, and then the day I found it, I had three or four sightings of different ones on the same day, after having not seen any for probably about 15 years up to that point. I wonder if animals keep bird lists. Elephants are intelligent enough. I wonder if they note different species. And Lucio, you said you were fascinated with that building I mentioned. Yeah, I forget what it's called, but it's in Zimbabwe. It's been around for a while. Um, and I couldn't explain the specifics of the design, but it's all based on that idea of having a central chimney where all the heat that's generated by all the shops and the people rise up that central chimney and then descend after it cools much closer to the surface and creates that convection current, pulling in the cooler, fresher air and circulating everything through the building. So I forget that's been around for, well, I don't know, but I think at least 10 years ago that that was built. But yeah, lots of interesting stuff happening in the world by some very, very clever people. Right, everybody, unfortunately, that is that. I suppose it's fitting that we finish with a couple of elephants on World Elephant Day. I hope you've all had a wonderful World Elephant Day and continue to do so. But thanks very much for joining us. Thanks for your questions and comments as always. And we will see you next time. Have a fabulous rest of your Tuesday.